We're back. It's the Morning Woodward Show here on the Woodward Sports Network. Rocking my St. Brian t-shirt. It's my guy. You know who else is my guy? John Macaroon, publisher of All Lions and host of the Detroit Sports Podcast. The great John Macaroon. John, welcome to the show this morning. How you doing?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Bless, guys. How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can. What's up, John? How you doing?
Man, I'm blessed. First and foremost, want to do a quick, because I'm a caring health professional, want to do a quick welfare check on Brandon. Everything okay, Kool-Aid? I know you got the job, but listen, do me a favor. Dial up Tom Goris and tell him to tell Monty Williams to not play Alec Burks because he sucks.
I love the John shot. We get one John shot a week. He comes out and just throws some strays at the Pistons. That's why I love John. John, I want to ask you some of what Aaron Rodgers said, talking about how wide open the NFC. It felt like for a while there, John, the 49ers were on a different level, and I still believe they're the best team in the conference on paper and record-wise. But what do you make of the NFC this year? How kind of wide open it is for the Detroit Lions, now winning some games here, heating up before the playoffs?
Yeah, thanks again, guys, for having me. Get to talk about the Detroit Lions division winners. First time in 30 years. And that puts you in a new stratosphere. Now you get to host a home playoff game. I love the fact the Lions can still compete for the number 1 seed. If they win out, they can be the number 2 seed. And here's what winning the division gives you. You guys see the many books behind me. I read this book to get me fired up for this year. This is what it gives you. Swagger. Swagger, baby. You know what that means? The ability and belief to go into any contest knowing that you can win. I really recommend you read that book, because there are elements of what Dan Campbell is doing that remind me of Jimmy Johnson. I think installing into this team belief that you can go out there and compete with anybody if you play your game. Right. And the swagger that the Detroit Lions now should possess, I think should give them confidence. Could you imagine? We're talking today, potentially this Detroit Lions team being the number 1 seed in the NFC. It's exciting. I know now you get a marquee test against the Cowboys. I can't wait to see it this Saturday, because it'll allow a lot of people to kind of get a sense of where this Lions football team is at. It has a playoff feel. It's a primetime game against a great opponent playing very well. So this is a playoff type matchup, and I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, John. It's funny you mentioned Jimmy Johnson and the Cowboys, because I think Dan Campbell at the end of one of his press conferences talked about how great how great of a matchup it's going to be. Compliment the Cowboys, compliment his own team, and then talks about win this one for Jimmy. Talk about Jimmy Johnson. Yeah, that was a pretty fun moment. But speaking of that game at Dallas, I know that the Lions have already clinched the division. We're all very happy as fans. I think we're confident in our team to at least win one playoff game. But going to Dallas, what would a win like that do? Could us fans and maybe even the team really puff their chests out and start talking, we can win this whole fucking thing? Would that be that type of win if they were able to achieve it?
Yeah, absolutely. Dallas Cowboys, America's team. Everybody loves looking at the Cowboys, especially them being 7-0 at home, playing really well. Obviously, right now, they're on a losing streak back-to-back games. But look, in the end, anytime you go out there and you can beat an NFC team that's got 10 wins, I think it bodes well for the Detroit Lions. Look, you guys talked about it. Aaron Rodgers kind of talking about the Lions now, the new guard. You got the Vikings, Bears, and Packers fans kind of downplaying the Lions win because of all the injuries their teams had. Look, too bad, so sad. Lions sit atop the division. And look, yeah, the belief would be there if you can beat a team with the caliber. Guys, the Cowboys, man, when you look at their roster, you realize they're a top 10 team in DVOA. Really opportunistic defense. Dak Prescott leads the NFL in touchdowns. You recognize this is a good football team, especially when they play at home. It definitely would send shockwaves throughout throughout the country. But in the end, guys, I know everybody cares what the national media thinks, but in the end, the Lions aren't going to be a team that's just the darlings of the NFL world. Yeah, people will talk about them, but most importantly for that football team, it would give them confidence they could win in the postseason, maybe even on the road.
John, when you look at where the Lions were when Dan got here, and not just that, but when Sheila took over and when Brad got here, and you have Chris Spielman and Barry Sanders helping out with some of the decision-making, how would you delegate the credit for where the Lions are right now between a Brad, a Sheila, a Dan Campbell, maybe some of the players? How would you delegate that credit to where they've got now, winning their first division title in 30 years?
Yeah, Kool-Aid knows what a crappy owner looks like. That's Tom Burris. The Detroit Lions got a much better owner in Sheila Hemp. You recognize right away she had a vision. So first and foremost, it starts with Sheila. She understood something was wrong with the culture. It was a losing culture.
Right.
That photo is iconic. I was in the building when Sheila Hemp was like this in that game on Thanksgiving. I was there. I was sitting there, and among the 20 reporters that were in Ford Field during the COVID era. It was a nightmare covering the Matt Patricia era. And she recognized, okay, I'm not just going to sit in a big mansion in LA and just do nothing. She made changes immediately in the season, blew out Matt Patricia, and said, okay, how do I start this thing? I need to identify what the culture is and what people can relate to. And that starts with identifying and bringing back Chris Spielman to work with the organization, to instill the grit, the resiliency, somebody that understands football. Then you pair Brad Holmes with Dan Campbell. Obviously, it starts with Sheila, and then you recognize what the front office and coaches have done. Look what they've brought here. They've brought in players that when they do face adversity, it doesn't just keep happening. This football team hasn't lost back-to-back games this year. So you recognize that the players that have been brought here have a certain psychological makeup that allows them to succeed at the NFL level. So definitely it starts at the top with Sheila, but it definitely, the most of the credit goes to Sheila, but a lot of the credit will go to Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes as well for what they've brought this Metro Detroit community in their football team.
Oh man, it's so great to talk about where the Lions were and where they are now. It always makes picks you up when you're having a bad day, or makes your day better when you're even having a good day. But I want to get into the next game a little bit at Dallas. Do you think the Lions, especially their offensive line, has what it takes to neutralize Micah Parsons?
Oh, yeah, that's the biggest concern, right? Micah Parsons, over 10 sacks, definitely a player that is going to be a focal point for the Detroit Lions offensive line. But guys, guess what? You got one of the best right tackles in all of the game. Arguably, when you dig into the numbers, Sam, and I know you do, and maybe you'll spit it off in a rant, Penei Sewell is having arguably one of the best seasons at right tackle of all time.
Sure.
And I think the challenge that he's going to have now with Micah Parsons, I think, is going to bring the best out of him. You've seen a player that wants to protect his quarterback. This offensive line is going to play at a high level. And you recognize, too, that you can scheme away a little bit from Micah Parsons. But look, here's also something that you're seeing now on film from Jared Goff. He's recognizing where the pressure's coming from a little bit better. He's getting the football out. A lot of times you hear Ben Johnson, when we go out to Allen Park, he says that the best way we can prepare Jared Goff is to let him know the answers going into the game, meaning what that means is he needs to be aware quickly of where the pressure's coming from, who the check down is, where the number one target is quickly. And if everything is going well, you neutralize a guy like Micah Parsons by getting the football out quickly, maybe even kind of some sneakiness there with some draw plays. And one of the weaknesses that the Cowboys have is in the run game. And if you can just definitely learn from the Bills and what they were able to do, they were able to rush for over 220 yards against the Cowboys. If you can neutralize Micah Parsons and avoid the big turnover, Lions got a chance to compete and score some points.
But now, what about that defense? You got some guys coming back. I know James Houston, his clock might be activated soon. He's not going to play this week, but he's at least trending in the right direction. You got Aleem McNeil coming back in the near future. But guys that'll be able to make an impact this week, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he'll be out there this week, correct?
We're going to find out later today for sure, but I would expect, based on what we're seeing in practice, that he would be out there. Man, it would be such a boost to see CD out there. I think that it gives you another opportunistic player that can force turnovers. I think the development and emergence of Ifeatu Melifonwu definitely should give the Lions fans a lot of confidence. But, guys, you got to also recognize, too, Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, they've developed some chemistry that is really out of this world. It's something to be mindful of because if you're the Cowboys, the first thing that you're salivating is, oh my goodness, it's Cam Sutton and Khalil Dorsey. You're looking at that side of the field with Khalil Dorsey or Vildor and saying, we better target this side of the field as much as possible. You recognize that it's going to be potentially one of the best games of the year. It could be very high scoring and very much so in line with a game where the Lions offense has to keep up. But Dan Campbell said it. If they can just get 1 or 2 turnovers, that's the key. If they're able to be opportunistic, get that turnover and get the ball back to the Lions offense, then you got a shot. But man, yeah, it's going to be hard to limit the Cowboys. I think this game has a chance where you sit back, eat your popcorn, and enjoy an entertaining football game.
And I think that's what it's going to come down to, John, to be honest with you, as the secondary, because I think this run defense has proven all year they're consistent. You know what they're going to do every game. They're going to stop the run. And Tony Pollard, speaking of the run game they're going against, he's struggled to run the football all year. So it's a good matchup, I think. My concern, and you nailed it, you saw what Justin Jefferson just did, and CeeDee Lamb is not Justin Jefferson, but CeeDee Lamb is having a career year, and he's been tearing up secondaries. He had a great game last week, even though they stopped going to him late in that Miami game. But that, to me, I'm curious, John, if Aaron Glenn will continue the Cam Sutton traveling adjustment he's made, because I think that's your best option, because you know the Cowboys, they're going to find ways to get CeeDee Lamb, a Khalil Dorsey, and they're going to get him open. They're going to have chunk plays. So is that fair to say that defensively, yes, you want to get a pass rush and create pressure, that's obvious, but this game's going to come down to the secondary holding up?
Yeah, absolutely. You look at it too, though, guys. We had a chance to talk to Aaron Glenn earlier this week, and what we've all seen on film is his new blitz packages have been working. You've seen Ifeatu Melifonwu, his speed and physicality. He can also, the benefit of having CD Deuce back is you can play a little bit more dime packages, which allows for 6 defensive backs. You can bring up Ifeatu Melifonwu. You got to get creative, and you got to time the blitzes just right. But if you pressure Dak Prescott, if Aiden Hutchinson continues his play and kind of just being a menace, I know the sack numbers aren't there, but he's a menace. He forces disruption. And sometimes I know we definitely fall in love with the sack totals, but when you just look at the last interception from Nick Mullins, Aiden Hutchinson's pressure forced Nick Mullins up in the pocket, which forced the interception. So you recognize that there's a lot of ways this football team can get to Dak Prescott. The secondary definitely is key, and they just got to hold on, because if you don't get pressure, there's no way the Lions secondary does not have the caliber, a number 1 lockdown corner to shut down weapons. CeeDee Lamb's going to get his. If you're a fantasy owner, I would play CeeDee Lamb in your championship game, but at the same time, if you can limit the Cowboys from scoring as many touchdowns, then you'll have an opportunity. Man, this is going to be close, guys. This could be one of those games where the team that has the football last wins it.
I mean, the reality is, you talked about it with CeeDee Lamb. I mean, Justin Jefferson went off against the Lions last week, and it didn't matter. And then Keenan Allen, we remember the Chargers game, went off against the Lions, and ultimately the Lions still won. I like what you said about Aiden Hutchinson, by the way. I've had to deal with a lot of the hate and the slander. But anywho, let me just one more question from me. If the Lions are to win this game, who would you predict would be the, I would say, most valuable player of that game for the Lions?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to go with Mr. Reliable, number 14, Amon-Ra St. Brown. The chemistry that he's developed with Jared Goff, man, it's amazing. He's got the swagger. He's a total package. I think that obviously last year he didn't get to finish the game. It was a noticeable absence. You recognize that, man, what he does, what he brings to the table, it's not easy to be that consistent, to be somebody that everybody knows is getting the football and still can record over 10 receptions. And really what he does really well is in key moments, along with Sam Laporta, when the Lions need a key third down execution and to move the chains, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I expect him to want to continue to showcase what he brings to the table in primetime. I expect him as well to have a solid performance. I think he helped a lot of people last week advance in fantasy. He'll do the same thing this week in the championship. Start Amon-Ra St. Brown, no doubt.
One more question for you, John. You mentioned it already with Iffy, but when he was drafted, I mean, you like his athleticism, you like the size. You know, he played corner at Syracuse. He changed his position to safety. A lot of guys in the Lions secondary that could play multiple positions, so it's a great thing. Where the hell did he come from? And I know AG kind of spoke on it. You were there. You got to hear Aaron Glenn, but what's the explanation on Iffy? It feels like he just shot out of the sky, and now the Lions got a premier secondary player that it just hasn't slowed down, John. You can't take him off the field.
No, it may appear that way, but I've been covering the team. I saw, obviously, what Brad Holmes definitely saw on film. Look, this is an individual, a player that was scouted and drafted by the Lions. And you guys got to also remember, part of the reason why we're talking about a division-winning team is their draft and develop strategy. The only reason why he hasn't made an impact sooner is because he's been battling injuries. And you look at one of the strengths of Aaron Glenn, obviously a defensive back who played in the league. He loves safeties that have played the cornerback position. And then, guys, here's the tough part with what the Lions do at times. What they do is they take players and they test them by putting them at multiple different spots. Now, maybe in college he was more comfortable playing at the cornerback spot and things like that. But here in the NFL, Aaron Glenn wants his defensive backs to do a myriad of things. He's been given an opportunity, the practice, the development that he's had. Now you're seeing a player that has an opportunity to make plays. And look at his skill set. Physical, speed, definitely aware, playing alongside Kirby Joseph, who has a similar style. The influence of C.D. Deuce being there as well, along with Brian Branch. That's a room that's competing against each other. So there's no question that the room is improving. And what a benefit that the Lions are going to have when you have players that are drafted and develop in your system. It's definitely the way in which you gain success and keep success.
No question. Good stuff today, John. And by the way, if you want more of John's content, you can follow him. He's publisher of All Lions and, of course, host of the Detroit Sports Podcast. If you don't know who John is, well, you're living under a rock. The man is one of the best in the city, covers the Detroit Lions. Check out all his stuff. We appreciate you, John. We'll see you next Thursday. I know win or lose this weekend, you'll have plenty of content to be able to cover.
No, I appreciate you guys. If you want to check out potentially our thoughts on how the Lions could handle the safety rotation when CD comes back, we did a piece yesterday at All Lions examining how the Lions could handle the safety rotation, because you got 4 good ones and the opportunities are aplenty for Aaron Glenn. Let's go Lions.
Let's go Lions. That's a good problem to have, by the way. Thanks, John. Appreciate you. Really quickly, got to tell you about our friends over at Planet